The colony had always been a quiet place, almost forgotten by the rest of human space. It sat far from busy trade routes, far from military patrols, and far from anything that could bring trouble. People there lived simple lives, growing food, running small workshops, and raising families. No one expected anything unusual to happen. Life was peaceful, predictable, and almost slow. That changed in a single afternoon. It began with a tremor in the sky. A deep sound rolled through the air, strong enough to shake windows and send dust drifting off rooftops. People stepped out of their homes, shading their eyes, trying to understand what was happening. Some thought it was a meteor. Some thought it was another mining accident. But everyone froze when they saw the light. Several bright shapes appeared high above the colony, shimmering like flames in the sky. They didn't fall. They didn't drift. They moved with impossible grace, almost like they were dancing. Their surfaces glowed with gold and white colors, shifting like living metal. For a moment, people were stunned by the beauty, unsure if they were witnessing a natural phenomenon or something far greater. Then the shapes slowed, aligned perfectly, and descended in formation. They were ships sleek, curved, and completely unlike anything humans had built. They looked more like art than machines. A soft hum filled the air as they approached, a sound that felt more like a vibration inside the chest than a noise. The ships landed outside the colony on an open plain. Dust rose in wide circles around them. Every movement was silent and smooth, almost hypnotic. People stood at a distance, unsure whether to run or stay. No one had ever seen alien visitors before. Not here, not this far out. Doors opened on the golden ships, and tall figures stepped out. Their bodies seemed to glow slightly, as if they carried their own light. Their faces were calm, their expressions unreadable. Their eyes were bright, almost too bright, and their voices echoed gently in the air as they spoke in a language unfamiliar to anyone. But these beings didn't stay mysterious for long. When they finally switched to a translator device, their first words shocked every person listening. "We are the Aurelians," the lead figure said. "We are your guardians, your guides, and your higher beings. We come from the realms above. Some of you may call us gods." The colony leaders exchanged confused looks. People whispered among themselves. Most didn't believe the claim, but the Aurelians carried themselves with such confidence that doubt felt small and daring. The aliens moved without effort, their robes floating around them as if supported by invisible air currents. Their hands glowed faintly whenever they gestured to prove their divinity. One Aurelian raised an arm. A nearby rock floated upward, spinning slowly in the air. Gasps filled the crowd. Another flicked a hand, and a beam of soft light bent into a spiral, dancing above their heads like a living ribbon. They touched a metal panel on one of their ships and made it melt, reshape, and harden again, all in seconds. The abilities looked impossible. To people who had only basic scientific tools and simple machines, these displays felt supernatural. Many colonists stepped back in fear. Some fell to their knees, unsure if these beings were telling the truth or trying to intimidate them. The leaders of the colony tried to respond with calm. They walked forward slowly and greeted the Aurelians politely. They thanked them for visiting and asked what their purpose was. They expected diplomacy, maybe trade, maybe communication. Instead, they received a firm, unsettling answer. "You will follow our guidance," the Aurelian leader said. "We offer protection and order. In return, you will provide what we request: food, minerals, materials, obedience. This is how harmony is built." The leader of the colony tried to negotiate, but each attempt was brushed aside. Any question was met with a gentle smile that didn't feel friendly. "We do not negotiate with those below us," the Aurelian leader said softly. "You will understand in time." The tone was calm, but the message was clear. These visitors weren't guests. They were conquerors who hid their demands in graceful language. Soon after, the Aurelians spread across the colony. They walked among the buildings, inspecting the people and their technology. Their drones floated overhead, shaped like glowing spheres, humming quietly. The drones recorded everything: faces, tools, harvest machines, energy generators. Whenever someone asked what they were collecting, the Aurelians simply replied, "Observations for your own improvement." Some colonists believed them. They thought maybe these beings truly were superior, maybe even divine. Others felt a growing knot of fear inside their stomachs. Nothing about the Aurelians felt right. They were polite, but cold, beautiful, but threatening. The next morning, the Aurelians gathered everyone in the central square. The sun rose behind them, creating a halo effect around their silhouettes. It was almost theatrical. "We will now guide your daily operations," the lead Aurelian announced. "For your safety, certain rules must be followed." The rules appeared on glowing tablets. Resource quotas were listed. Curfews were established. Permission was required for travel outside the colony. Workshops had to be inspected. The energy grid was taken over by Aurelian systems. Anyone who questioned the rules was told they simply didn't understand higher purpose. A soft, soothing voice covered strict orders. The contrast made everything feel unsettling. Then came the punishments. One worker refused to stop, repairing a broken generator after curfew. A drone released a bright pulse of energy that shocked him to the ground, not enough to seriously harm him, but enough to leave him unable to speak for hours. The Aurelians called it a gentle correction. People began to whisper behind closed doors. Fear grew like a shadow in every home. Families kept their lights dim at night to avoid attention. Children were told not to go near the drones. Even the bravest colonists walked with lowered heads. Despite all this, the Aurelians behaved as if they were benevolent rulers. They continued to demonstrate their abilities. They levitated boulders to build new platforms. They created illusions of glowing shapes in the sky. They used light to heal small injuries. Every act was meant to remind the humans how weak and simple they were in comparison. The colony captain, responsible for security, felt helpless. The colony had no real weapons. Its ships were old and slow. Even the communication systems were outdated. The captain gathered a small group secretly and discussed possibilities, but every idea sounded too risky. Resisting openly would only draw harsher punishment. When the Aurelians discovered the colony's communication room, they disabled the long-range transmitter. They said it was to prevent interference with their work. In truth, they didn't want anyone calling for help, but one person wouldn't accept silence. A young communications officer, quiet and often overlooked, spent nights studying the damaged transmitter. They hid under the console whenever a drone passed by. With shaking hands and limited tools, they managed to create a small, unstable signal. It wasn't strong, but it was enough to send a message into deep space. A simple message: colony in danger. Unknown alien force occupying. Need assistance. The signal went out into the cold darkness. Hours later, the Aurelians detected what had been done. Instead of anger, they laughed. Their voices echoed through the square as they mocked the attempt. "No human vessel can challenge us," the leader said. "Your message will drift for years, reaching no one. Even if it did, no one could stand before our power." The colonists heard those words and felt despair settle in. They had no warships nearby, no allies close enough to respond. The Aurelians were right about one thing: help was too far away. Or so everyone believed. The young officer sat alone that night, staring at the sky, wondering if the message had simply disappeared into empty space. They didn't know if any hope remained. They didn't know if anyone had heard. They didn't know if anyone cared. But far beyond the colony's reach, Someone had indeed received the signal, a retired captain, drifting through forgotten sectors, following old patrol routes out of habit, and he was already turning his ship toward the colony. The days after the Aurelians took control felt heavier than anything the colony had ever experienced. People still woke up early, still cooked breakfast, still walked to work, but everything felt different. The air felt tense. Every sound made people glance over their shoulders. Even small things, like the hum of generators or the clatter of tools, seemed louder because silence had become a warning. The Aurelians moved through the colony like they owned every inch of it. Their glowing drones floated above streets, peeking into windows and scanning every corner. The colonists started keeping curtains closed, even during the day. Children were told not to stare at the drones. Farmers worked faster, afraid that doing too little might draw attention. Every evening, the Aurelians gathered the colonists in the central square for more guidance. They stood on raised platforms, their golden robes flowing as if touched by invisible wind. Their voices were calm, perfectly smooth, almost hypnotic. But behind all that softness was pressure to obey, pressure to stay silent, pressure to accept whatever they said as truth. "You must understand," the Aurelian leader said one evening. "We guide you because your world has not reached the level needed for full independence." Many colonists exchanged uneasy glances. They had lived independently for decades. They didn't need guardians. They didn't need protectors who behaved like rulers. But saying those thoughts out loud could bring punishment. A miner whispered to a friend in a low voice, "Guidance? This feels more like a cage." The friend gently nudged him to stay quiet. Two drones hovered close by, their glowing surfaces reflecting the crowd's nervous faces. The next day, the Aurelians introduced new resource demands. They wanted metals, fuel, food, and special minerals, more than the colony could comfortably provide. They didn't ask, they instructed. "These contributions are necessary," the leader said. "You are part of a greater purpose now." Some workers stayed late in the mines, pushing their tired bodies to dig deeper, not because they wanted to, but because they were scared. The drones followed them underground, humming in narrow tunnels and making the workers' hands shake with every movement. Even basic activities were monitored. The Aurelians installed quiet surveillance beams along the streets. They said the beams were harmless and only measured order levels, but everyone knew what that meant. It meant control. A few colonists tried to reason with the Aurelians. They approached politely, hands open, trying to show respect. "We want peace," one of them said, "but this much pressure is hurting people. The quotas are too high." The Aurelian didn't get angry. Their face didn't change at all. They simply stated, "Weakness is temporary. You will adapt." And just like that, the conversation ended. The colonists walked away with heavy hearts. Later that night, two young workers returned home after a long shift. They talked in whispers about what they had seen, how the drones scanned every tool, every crate, every bag of food. They wondered how long the colony could survive like this. They worried about their families, their elderly, their children. But one of them said quietly, "Maybe someone heard the distress call." The other sighed. Or maybe it got lost. Or maybe the Aurelians were right. Even hope had become fragile. Inside the communication station, the young officer who had sent the signal spent nights staring at the equipment. The transmitter still glowed softly, but the signal strength was weak. They didn't know if the message had gone far enough. They didn't know if anyone would risk coming. But they still checked the systems every single night, whispering silently, "Please let someone hear us." More days passed, and the Aurelians grew even stricter. They started appearing inside workshops without warning, touching tools, examining machines, watching workers with glowing eyes. Some colonists said the Aurelians made them feel like insects being studied. The worst moment came when a group of farmers, tried to protect a small storage building. The Aurelians wanted the entire stockpile of grain for energy sampling. The farmers tried to explain that taking all of it would leave the A colony without food for a month. The Aurelian leader tilted their head slightly. Your hunger is temporary. Our research is eternal. When one farmer stepped forward in frustration, a drone released a short flash of energy that knocked him to his knees. It wasn't deadly, but it was enough to make everyone freeze. The Aurelians called it a calm pulse, but to the colonists, it was a warning written in bright light. People heard the farmers cry from nearby homes. Mothers pulled their children indoors. Workers dropped what they were doing and rushed to hide. Fear spread faster than wildfire. For the first time, the colonists truly understood that the Aurelians did not see them as equals. They saw them as resources, tools, subjects. That night, the colony felt silent in a way that made even footsteps sound loud. People whispered behind locked doors, wondering how long they could endure this, wondering if rebellion was possible, wondering if escape was possible, wondering if they should pray or prepare for the worst. The young officer sneaked back into the communication room again. They checked the transmitter, staring at the blinking lights as if those tiny signals carried the weight of the entire colony. There was still no response, no confirmation, nothing but silence. Still, they didn't stop trying. Meanwhile, the Aurelians continued to build structures outside the colony, tall, glowing towers that pulsed with golden light. The colonists didn't know what they were for, but the Aurelians said they were harmonic pillars, meant to align the colony with higher realms of order. Most people didn't believe that. For a moment, the pillars hummed at night, sending a low vibration through the ground. It wasn't harmful, but it kept people awake. Babies cried more. Elders clutched their beds and whispered that this place no longer felt like home. On the 5th night after the new rules, the Aurelians held a large gathering in the central square again. They announced new restrictions, stricter schedules, more resource requirements, and reduced movement. People listened with blank faces, exhausted and drained. The Aurelians seemed pleased. You will grow stronger through structure, the leader said. We offer direction. You offer loyalty. No one cheered. No one clapped. The only sound was the soft hum of the drones. After the gathering ended, small groups of colonists gathered in quiet corners. They spoke softly, almost crying, as they discussed how much they had lost in so little time. They wondered what the Aurelians really wanted. Some believed the Aurelians were preparing to drain the colony of everything valuable. Others believed the Aurelians were trying to reshape the colony into something else entirely. A few brave ones suggested resistance, but the idea always ended with the same question: with what weapons? The colony had hunting rifles, simple tools, and old machines. They didn't have anything that could challenge floating drones or powerful energy fields. Even if they tried to fight, the Aurelians might respond with something worse. But despite all the fear, one truth remained inside people's hearts. They wanted freedom, and deep in space, far from the colony. The retired captain who had heard the distress call was studying his navigation charts. His ship was old. His engines were tired. His shields were not as strong as they used to be. But the captain had something the Aurelians didn't expect: experience and determination. He knew the colony. He had visited it years ago during his service days. He remembered its quiet streets, its hard-working people, and its peaceful life. And now, someone there had called for help. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the data screen that showed the faint signal. It wasn't strong, but it was enough. He set a course immediately. This ship may be old, he muttered to himself, but it still has a job left to do. Back on the colony, no one knew help was coming. No one knew that a human warship, small, worn, but very real, was cutting through the silent darkness toward them. The Aurelians continued their rule with calm confidence, certain nothing could challenge them. But the illusion of their power was about to face something they hadn't expected at all. For several days, life in the colony continued under the same heavy pressure. The Aurelians walked around with calm faces, as if nothing could ever disturb them. Their drones watched every street, every workshop, every field. People tried to keep working, but they moved with fear sitting on their shoulders. The Aurelians seemed completely confident that no one would ever challenge them. They spoke often about their higher place in the universe and how humans were lucky to be in their presence. Their voices were always smooth, always steady, always filled with that same cold confidence that made the colonists feel small. But far away in deep space, something was moving toward them. Something small compared to the Aurelian ships, something worn and old, but something real. A human warship, just one, was burning through the dark, following the faint distress signal like a final thread of hope that the colonists didn't know this yet. They woke each morning with the same tension in their chest, wondering what new rule the Aurelians would announce, wondering how long this situation would last. One morning, the young communications officer who had sent the distress call checked the transmitter again. The equipment showed no reply. Every light blinked the same way as before. The signal had gone out, but the universe felt silent. The officer ran their hand through their hair and sighed, whispering to the empty room, "Please, just let someone hear us." The officer didn't know that, at that exact moment, the human warship was closer than any Aurelian scanner could detect. Inside the old ship, the retired captain stood near the front console. He studied the charts and the incoming data. The distress signal had grown weaker as he approached the colony's region, but he could still track its direction. It was like following a fading echo. The captain ran his fingers along the control panel. It was scratched, the paint worn, the edges chipped from years of use. The ship was not new, not impressive, not anything close to the mighty vessels humans once sent into important battles. But it was fast enough, strong enough, and armed just enough to make a difference. At least he hoped so. He muttered to himself, "If they're in trouble, then they will already know fear. Let's just hope we're not too late." Back on the colony, the Aurelians were preparing another instruction meeting. People were called into the central square again. The air was dry and warm. Dust rose as people walked slowly, feeling like prisoners being counted. The Aurelians stood on their platforms as usual, glowing slightly in the sunlight. The leader's voice echoed calmly across the square. "Your cooperation continues to be appreciated," the leader said. "With our guidance, you will soon become part of something far greater." The colonists listened quietly. They didn't respond. They didn't argue. They simply waited for the meeting to end, so they could go home and try to live as normally as they could under the circumstances. No one noticed that high above the sky, far beyond the colony's thin atmosphere, a human ship had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The ship's sensors lit up immediately. It detected the large Aurelian fleet around the planet. The captain's eyes narrowed. He wasn't surprised, but the sight was still intimidating. The Aurelian ships looked beautiful and dangerous, like living metal wrapped in light. But he didn't hesitate. He pushed a control switch. "Broadcast on all channels," he said. A moment later, every Aurelian ship received a direct message. "This is a human vessel responding to a distress call from the colony. Identify your purpose." Inside the colony, the Aurelians froze. The drones shifted position. The leader's eyes glowed brighter, and the calm voice they usually used changed slightly. It became tighter, sharper. They knew someone had arrived, but the colonists didn't know anything yet. They only noticed the Aurelians' sudden movement, that alert tension they had never shown before. Then the sky changed. The drones were the first to react. They rose higher, their golden lights intensifying. The Aurelians looked upward, and the colonists followed their gaze. People shaded their eyes, squinting at the sky, confused at first. They saw nothing. Then a small shape appeared above the clouds. A dark shape, solid, metallic, moving with clean, controlled power. It wasn't glowing. It wasn't shimmering with strange colors. It didn't look magical or divine. It looked human, strong, purposeful, real. One colonist whispered, "Is that?" Another breathed, "A warship?" The Aurelians didn't give them time to hope. They projected a loud voice across the colony through their own communication systems. To all humans below, remain calm. A primitive vessel has approached. It will be removed. Their tone wasn't just confident, it was annoyed. Angry that someone dared to interrupt their rule. On the human ship, the captain saw the Aurelian fleet shifting toward him. The golden ships moved in a slow, elegant arc, forming a circle around him. Their energy readings spiked. Their shields glowed softly. The captain took a deep breath. He knew how this would look from the colony's point of view. One small warship alone, facing a fleet that claimed to be gods. The odds weren't good, but he didn't turn away. He opened the communication channel again. This colony is under human protection. If your presence here is hostile, you are ordered to stand down. The Aurelians responded instantly, their voice echoing across open space. You have no authority here. Leave or be forced to leave. The colonists in the square heard this through the Aurelians' broadcast. Whisper after whisper spread through the crowd. A human ship is here. Someone came. We're not alone. Hope didn't return suddenly. It came like a small spark inside each heart. A spark people thought they had lost. The Aurelians, however, were no longer smiling. Their glowing eyes dimmed slightly in irritation. They activated their energy fields, ready to show the colonists that their godhood was uncheckable. They lifted into the sky. Rising smoothly toward the human ship. The young communications officer rushed out of the station and looked up, heart pounding. They recognized the shape of the ship from old records. It wasn't much, not compared to the Aurelians' golden vessels, but it was human. And that meant everything. Up above, the Aurelian ships fired the first warning shot. It wasn't a beam or a missile. It looked like a wave of bending light, twisting and shimmering as it moved through space. It was the same kind of ability they showed on the colony, just far stronger. The wave hit the human ship. On the ground, colonists gasped. The Aurelians lifted their heads proudly, as if they expected the ship to break apart instantly. But the warship didn't explode. It didn't crack. It didn't even drift. It held steady. A gust of disbelief spread through the crowd. They had seen those energy tricks bend metal, melt parts of buildings, lift stones. But the human ship simply absorbed the wave, like it was nothing more than a strong gust of wind. The captain sat calmly, watching the sensors. So that's their trick, he murmured. Illusions and field pressure. He flipped a switch. The old stabilizers on his ship hummed, but they worked. They countered the field with clean, grounded engineering, nothing fancy, nothing mystical, just real technology built by real hands. The Aurelians fired again, stronger this time. The ship shook slightly, but still didn't break. Back on the ground. The Aurelian leader showed the first sign of something none of the colonists had ever seen on there. Face uncertainty. The colonists saw it too. And for the first time since the Aurelians arrived, they felt something rising in their chest. Not fear. Strength. The human ship moved forward slowly, confidently. It wasn't attacking. It was showing that it wouldn't be pushed away, that it wouldn't bow, that humans, even far from home, even with an old ship, would stand their ground. A soft whisper moved through the square. They're not gods. They're just pretending. The Aurelians tried one more time, gathering energy into a bright, twisting sphere. They launched it toward the warship. The captain didn't even flinch. He pressed a single button. A rail round shot out silent, fast, precise. Not magical. Not glowing. Just a hardened piece of metal propelled by human engineering. The rail shot hit the Aurelian flagship. The impact was clean, controlled, powerful. It tore through the golden hull like a blade through cloth. Light burst from the wound. The flagship tilted sharply. Its glowing surface dimmed. The Aurelian formation broke apart in shock down on the colony. People gasped. Some covered their mouths. Some grabbed each other's arms, not in fear, but in disbelief. The Aurelians, claimed to be untouchable, had been hit, and their illusion had cracked. The moment the Aurelian flagship took the hit, everything in the sky seemed to pause. The golden light that had always surrounded their ships flickered strangely, like a candle disturbed by a sudden wind. The colonists on the ground stared upward with wide eyes. For weeks they had watched the Aurelians act like they were untouchable, like nothing in the universe could harm them. But now, the proof floated above them, a clear, visible wound in the side of the ship that had claimed absolute power. People whispered without meaning to. Their voices trembled, but not with fear this time. Something new had entered their hearts. They can be hurt. They're not what they said they were. They're not gods. The Aurelians, however, didn't accept that reality immediately. Their leader looked up at the damaged flagship with disbelief. Their glowing eyes dimmed for the first time since arriving on the colony. Their calm posture stiffened. For a moment, they looked almost human in their confusion. The leader raised a hand toward the sky, as if commanding the ship to recover. But nothing happened. The wound still sparked with weak light. The golden hull still hissed from the rail shot's impact. The ship didn't fall, but it didn't return to its perfect, flawless state either. Up in orbit, the retired human captain watched the sensor readings. He saw the Aurelian ships shifting around, their patterns breaking apart. They were confused, not used to reacting to real danger. He knew that if he attacked too aggressively, they might panic and try something extreme. He didn't want to destroy them all. He only wanted them to leave the colony alone. He kept his voice steady as he spoke through the comms. Aurelian fleet, stand down. You are not invincible, and you are not welcome here. The Aurelians didn't reply at first. They moved silently, as if trying to understand how a primitive vessel could resist their abilities. They launched another wave of distorted energy toward the human ship, this one stronger and more unstable. It bent the light around it, creating ripples through space dock from the colony. People watched as the wave rushed toward the warship. Some gasped, thinking this time the Aurelians might succeed. But the human ship stayed steady again. The stabilizers worked overtime, absorbing the impact with a deep, resonating hum. Inside the ship, the captain gripped the control handles. The ship shook harder this time, but held. Old machine, he whispered under his breath. Don't quit on me now. The Aurelian ships seemed frustrated. Their elegant movements grew sharper, less controlled. Their illusions, those soft lights and smooth energy flows, started to look messy. The colonists had never seen them like this, not even once. The Aurelians on the ground looked even more troubled. Their leader's expression twitched with something the colonists had never seen on their faces: stress. Or maybe fear. The leader lowered their hands slowly, almost tiredly, as if unable to believe what they were witnessing. Some colonists stepped closer together. Hope, small and fragile, was spreading from person to person like a gentle fire. High above, the captain made his next move. He powered the ship's engines and drifted forward slowly, deliberately. Not rushing, not attacking wildly, just moving with a steady confidence that said, I am not afraid of you. The Aurelian fleet backed away slightly. It wasn't much, just a small shift, but it told the entire story. For the first time, the Aurelians were reacting to a threat reacting to a human ship. Back on the ground, the Aurelian leader raised their voice in the colony square, projecting a message upward, but also loud enough for the people below to hear. This defiance is pointless, the leader announced. We are the superior force. This human vessel is insignificant. But their voice wasn't as calm as before. It wavered just a little. The colonists heard it clearly. That tiny tremble was enough to confirm what they had begun to believe. The Aurelians were not gods. The leader tried again, speaking louder. Their technology is weak. Their weapons are outdated. They cannot harm us again. Before they could finish, the rail cannon fired a second round. The shot streaked upward in a clean, straight line. It struck a second Aurelian ship, not the flagship this time, but one of the escort vessels. The round tore through its side. The golden surface cracked like brittle glass struck by a stone. The ship drifted, sparks flying around it. Its stable formation broke entirely as it spun slightly off axis. The colonists gasped again, louder this time. Not out of fear, but out of shock and disbelief and a sudden burst of confidence. They're breaking formation. They're scared. They said nothing could touch them. The Aurelians standing in the colony square looked around, clearly aware that their image was collapsing. Their glowing drones turned their lights dim and retreated upward, as if they too sensed that their superiority had vanished. The leader tried to restore control. Do not be alarmed. Humans rely on crude tools. Their methods are violent. The leader didn't finish the sentence. Not because they didn't want to, but because their own fleet broke formation entirely. For the first time, the Aurelian ships moved with fear instead of grace. Panic spread among them. Every colonist could see it dot up above. The captain spoke calmly into the communication channel again. Aurelian fleet, this is your final warning. Leave the colony's airspace. I do not want further conflict, but I will defend these people. His voice was steady, not angry, not emotional. Just steady, confident. Human. The Aurelians did respond this time, but the arrogance was gone. Their voice was sharp and defensive. You do not understand the consequences of, the captain interrupted them. Try me. There was silence. A long, cold silence. Then the Aurelian fleet pulled back. Not much, but enough to show hesitation. Enough to show they no longer wanted this fight. On the ground, the Aurelian leader's glow dimmed. Their calm mask finally cracked. They looked at the colonists as if they were seeing them for the first time, not as weak subjects, but as witnesses to their defeat. Something inside the colonists changed at that moment. Shoulders lifted. Postures straightened. People who had been avoiding looking the Aurelians in the eyes now stared directly at them. A miner whispered, "You lied to us." A farmer added softly, "You were never gods." The Aurelians didn't answer. Their silence said everything. Up above, the captain prepared a third rail shot, but he didn't fire it. He didn't need to. The Aurelian fleet was already beginning to retreat, climbing higher into the sky, their glowing surfaces flickering with instability. The colonists watched as the golden ships rose. The light from their hulls wasn't beautiful now. It was fading, uneven, nervous. "They're leaving," someone whispered. "They can't take it." Another said, "They're afraid." Someone else added, no one said it loudly. But everyone felt it. The illusion was gone. The Aurelians' power had always looked magical, flawless, untouchable. But when real force met real technology, human technology, the truth was revealed. Their abilities made noise, created light, bent air. They looked impressive, but they couldn't match a warship built by hands, tested in battles. Designed by people who had survived 1,000 challenges. The Aurelians were powerful. Yes, but humans were stronger in ways that couldn't be seen from the outside. The young communications officer watched the sky with tears in their eyes. They knew the colony wasn't safe yet, but hope had finally returned. They whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are." In space, the captain watched the Aurelian fleet retreat to a higher orbit. He kept his weapons ready, but didn't push forward. He didn't want to force them into panic. He only wanted them gone. On the ground, the colonists slowly gathered in the square, standing closer to each other. Some were shaking, but not from fear. From relief. From freedom creeping back into their lungs. From the realization that they weren't alone anymore. The Aurelian leader lowered their head. Defeated, but still trying to hold on to dignity. "We will not forget this," the leader said quietly, their voice far weaker than ever before. "You have made an error." A villager stepped forward, fists clenched. "No," the villager said softly, but firmly. "You made the error when you thought we were helpless." The leader had no reply. Up in orbit, the Aurelian fleet turned their ships away from the colony. Their golden glow dimmed, their formation broken. They began drifting farther, farther, farther from the planet. And every colonist felt the same thing rising inside them. The illusion had shattered forever. When the sun rose over the colony the next morning, the light felt different. It was the same star, the same sky, the same dusty land people walked on every day. But something inside everyone had changed. For the first time in weeks, they felt like the ground under their feet truly belonged to them again. The fear that once clung to every wall, every room, every corner of the settlement had begun to fade like smoke blown away by a strong wind. People came out of their homes slowly, as if they were unsure whether the nightmare was really gone or if the Aurelians would return at any moment. But all they saw in the sky were the trails of broken ships disappearing into distant space. The colony had survived something they never imagined they would ever face. And it was all because one old warship refused to leave them behind. The retired captain stepped off his landing ramp, and the crowd that had gathered did not cheer loudly. Instead, they moved closer in silence, their faces filled with a strange mix of relief, respect, and disbelief. They had seen the things the Aurelians claimed were divine powers crumble once the human warship arrived. They had witnessed how technology, courage, and experience could stand firm in front of what once seemed unstoppable. The captain didn't make a long speech. He didn't raise his voice or act like a hero. He simply folded his hands behind his back and looked at the people as if they were old friends he had come to visit. A few children stood at the front of Vaunt, the crowd staring up at him with wide eyes, still unsure if he was real or part of the story that had just unfolded around them. One of the colony's elders stepped forward, speaking in a voice that still trembled slightly. He thanked the captain for saving them when no one else came. The captain shook his head gently, saying he did not do what he did for reward or praise. He explained that he had once served in human space defense, and even though his active duty had ended long ago, he could not ignore a distress signal from people in need. To him, it did not matter if the colony was small or far away. Humans helped humans. That was enough. The colonists listened carefully as he explained who the Aurelians really were. They were not gods. They were not beings of pure energy or higher creation. They were simply a species that had learned how to control energy fields in ways that appeared mysterious to unprotected worlds. For many decades, the Aurelians had traveled through remote regions, searching for small settlements that lacked military support. They used fear, illusions, and threats to make themselves appear divine. They pretended to be higher beings, hoping no one would challenge their stories. The captain told them that humans had encountered the Aurelians before, but always in places far from the main colonies. Each time, Once their illusions were broken, they fled quickly. They relied on belief more than strength. If the enemy stopped believing, their control vanished. The people of the colony exchanged uneasy glances as the truth settled in. Everything they had felt during those weeks, the fear, the confusion, the helplessness, had been built on lies. The Aurelians had counted on the colony's isolation, hoping no human ship would come. They had hoped their displays of light and energy would make people fall to their knees. But the moment the warship arrived, their confidence shattered. Some colonists felt anger rising in their hearts, but the captain reminded them that anger was natural, yet dangerous if left unchecked. Instead of holding on to it, he encouraged them to focus on what mattered now, rebuilding their home, regaining their sense of safety, and making sure no one could fool them so easily again. Over the next few days, the colony repaired the damage left behind. Drones that once watched over their every move were taken apart and studied, helping the colony understand exactly how the Aurelians operated. The structures the Aurelians had modified were restored to normal. People cleaned walls, fixed generators, replanted gardens, and reopened their small shops. For many, these simple acts felt like reclaiming pieces of their lives. Workers moved through the streets with a new sense of unity. Neighbors who barely spoke to each other before were now sharing tools, meals, and stories. Children who had stayed inside for weeks now played outdoors again, laughing in open spaces without constantly checking the sky. During this time, the captain and his small crew offered their help wherever they could. They repaired defense sensors, strengthened the colony's broadcast tower, and taught the people how to recognize common signs of false divine displays. The colonists were surprised to learn how much of the Aurelians' power came from simple tricks combined with advanced energy manipulation. For example, the light distortions that seemed supernatural were actually focused heat distortions mixed with reflective plasma. The levitations the Aurelians performed were done with careful magnetics and hidden drones. The voices in the air were nothing more than compressed sound waves targeted at specific frequencies. Knowledge brought confidence. The more they understood, the more the colonists realized they hadn't faced gods, they had faced manipulators. One evening, as the sky turned a deep golden color, a group of the colony's younger workers gathered near the landing bay where the old warship rested. They looked at it the way someone might look at a mountain or a monument, something solid, something reassuring. They wondered aloud about the battles it must have fought in its younger days, the places it had traveled, the challenges it had withstood. The captain overheard their curiosity and joined them with an easy smile. He explained that the ship was far from perfect. It had dents, burn marks, old repairs, and outdated systems. But it also had history. It had been built by human hands and flown by human crews who believed in duty, protection, and unity. It didn't shine like the Aurelians' ships, but every mark on its hull carried a story of endurance. He told them that strength wasn't always loud or bright. Sometimes strength was quiet. Sometimes it came from experience instead of showmanship. The Aurelians had relied on appearance, while humans relied on resilience. In the end, resilience won. As days passed, the colony began to feel alive again. People slept better at night. The sound of laughter returned to the community halls. The fields outside the settlement were planted once more, and slowly the fear faded into memory. But one thing did not fade: the story. Members of the colony began sending messages to other settlements, sharing what had happened. They described how the Aurelians arrived, claiming to be gods, how they used illusions to control innocent people, and finally, how a single human warship cut through their lies with truth and courage. The story spread from one world to another. It wasn't told like a grand tale of war. It was told like a reminder symbol, honest and powerful. People repeated it when teaching young students about critical thinking. Explorers repeated it when visiting distant colonies. Traders repeated it in markets far from the settlement. In every version, the message stayed the same. No matter how advanced someone looks, no matter how bright their lights or how loud their claims, truth has a way of showing itself. Humans had grown through challenges, through mistakes, through centuries of pushing forward. They didn't need divine power. They needed unity, awareness, and courage. Before the captain prepared to leave, the colony organized a small gathering near the central square. It wasn't a ceremony or a formal event. It was just people wanting to thank someone who had changed the course of their lives. They cooked food, shared stories, and invited the captain to sit with them as a friend, not a hero. He accepted their hospitality with humility. When asked how they could repay him, he simply said that they could look after each other, stay alert, and never let fear silence their voices again. That was enough for him. Finally, the day came for the warship to depart. The captain walked up the ramp slowly, turning back one last time to wave at the colony that had grown so close to him in such a short time. The people waved back, not with desperation, but with warmth. They knew they were safe now. They knew they were stronger than before. As the engines ignited and the old ship lifted into the sky, a soft cheer rose from the colony. It was not loud or dramatic. It was gentle, hopeful, and full of gratitude. They watched until the ship became a tiny point of light, then finally disappeared into the endless dark. From that day forward, the colony stood differently. They were no longer the isolated settlement that fell for an illusion. They were the place where truth broke through lies. The place where a single warship proved that courage could defeat fear. The place where people learned that no one had the right to declare themselves gods over others. And in the quiet moments of everyday life, when someone fixed a broken tool, or a child asked about the marks on the old landing bay, or a worker glanced at the stars, there was always a quiet memory of the time a human warship came out of nowhere and shattered a false legend. The colony never forgot that moment, not because it showed the power of a single ship, but because it showed the strength that lived within ordinary people, waiting to rise when they needed it. And that strength, they knew, would stay with them for generations.